BBC London 94.9.
London's news.
London stories.
How are you, Wayne?
I'm right, thank you, yeah. I've got a little piece here, a little kind of a trinket kind of thing.
Yeah.
In 1996, I had a friend and she was a primary school teacher.
Right.
And obviously, the last day term, children come and give them gifts. Normally it's Maltesers and things, isn't it?
It's a bit beyond apples, but yeah.
She was a little bit disturbed by this gift she'd been given by this particular little girl who'd been there a good few months, but she was, as far as I could work out, she was a foster child.
Right.
I think she was a bit troubled. She'd be given a bit of a warning about it that she could be a bit of trouble, but she hadn't found her that much trouble.
Right.
But on the last day, and it was the last time she was going to see her, I think, she kind of hung back and gave her this present. And she wasn't sure what to make of it. It was like beautifully wrapped. And when she opened it up, she couldn't work it out. Inside was a little piece of wood. Right? And I don't know if you know. Do you know this kind of formation called the Devil's Tower? I think it's in Wyoming. It just juts out of the land. It's a really weird kind of strange formation.
It's a rock formation. It's not a man-made tower.
All I can describe it. This looks like that, but it's about as big as a kind of medium-sized jar of Vaseline.
Right.
It's got ridges cut in it. And she couldn't work it out. And underneath, she found a little card, and it said on it, always check the driftwood. The longer it's been sloshing around in the swim of things, the more it has to offer. And she was looking, and underneath this piece, because it was flat on the bottom, and it stands beautifully upright, it had been burnt into the bottom, and it said Chelsea, 1996.
Chelsea? What?
Chelsea, in
Sussex.
Sussex.
Yeah.
And she suddenly realised it was a school trip they'd been on, and this girl must have found it on the beach. It was a piece of driftwood.
Okay.
So,
but it was perfectly formed into this.
It had formed into this by dragging up and down and up and down, and it's beautifully. It stands beautifully, kind of like on a surface, because the bottom is not flat, but it allows it to stand, just like this rock formation does, jutting up.
Right.
And I think it's teak, and I've looked at it, and I reckon it was once a little piece of stair rail.
Okay.
Could have been from a ship, you never know, could have been from a shipwreck or anything.
Yeah.
So she was a bit scared of this. And
why was she scared of it, Wayne?
Well, I think she was, because I don't think she quite understood, but I took it to be like a metaphor of this girl's life.
Right.
I thought that this was symbolic, that she's being pushed around like a piece of driftwood.
Right, but she's being shaped into something beautiful.
Yeah. And it's probably the best. Next year, she gave it to me. She believed that this girl actually, came up with this kind of, which should be in a book of quotations.
What's the quote again, Wayne?
It says, always check the driftwood. The longer it's been sloshing around in the swim of things, the more it will have to offer.
It isn't bad, actually, is it?
No.
It isn't bad. And have you Googled it and that and seen if it's
I've Googled it and I've never found it.
It's not attributed to any...
deep, and she was very intelligent. I think it came from herself. I definitely do.
And how old was she?
I think she was about 11. I just think it was meant to come to me, you know what I mean?
Really? What makes you think that?
Well, because I understood it. And sometimes you should check out people, shouldn't you? You should, some people that, she was probably in an area where all the people were nice and comfortable and, had a quite nice life. And maybe she was overlooked a little bit, but maybe she had a little bit more to her.
Well, what do you think happened to her?
Probably she's probably a radio presenter.
Yeah, we're all driftwood sloshing around different radio stations.
Yeah, but I mean, don't you think it's just like, I don't know if you got it or not. Some people don't get it. Some people say, I'd rather have had the Maltesers. Whether it's saying that.
This is Drive Time, weekdays from 5
on BBC London 94.9.
An inquest has found that the deaths of 6 people in a Camberwell tower block fire could have been prevented by proper fire safety checks. 3 adults and 3 children died in the fire at Luckenoll House in July 2009. It was Britain's worst ever tower block blaze. And today, an inquest jury have criticised the owners, Southwark Council and the fire and rescue operation. BBC London special correspondent Kurt Barling joins us from the inquest at Lambeth Assembly Hall. Good evening, Kurt.
Hiya.
Can you explain the main findings of this for us?
Well, look, the narrative verdict of a jury is a very long one, and they have to give a long explanation of what they consider to be the facts that led to the death of all 6 people. In brief, they said that the Southwark Council did not maintain the tower block to proper fire standards. As a consequence, when the fire broke out, it spread too rapidly. That's the first point. The second point is that even though rescue services arrived and acted in a timely manner, the jury found that they did not sufficiently prioritise targeting the flats where individuals were trapped.
Kurt Barling, thank you so much.
BBC London 94.9.
Ian in Surbiton, you want to talk about safety in London?
My story comes from 4 years ago when I was going to work early in the morning. Came round the corner, 3 teenagers separated. One had a hammer. I thought, here we go.
Goodness me.
So I said to one of them, OK, mate, let's not be silly. And I said, I've got £10 and that's all I got. And he said, you got anything else? I said, well, I've got a Sony Walkman I'm listening to. And he took that and he gave it back. You know, very fashion-conscious boy.
What year was this?
2008.
You had a Sony Walkman in 2008? He probably felt sorry for you. He probably said, where's your iPod?
Exactly.
This isn't the Discman, this is the Walkman, the cassettes.
This is things like tapes.
I'm surprised he didn't give you the tenner back as well and tell you to save up for an iPod.
Well, yeah, you got that feeling. I mean, we sort of separated then. They went their way and I went mine. And then after about a minute, I doubled back to where I knew I could get to a phone.
Yeah.
I rang 999. Within 10 minutes, a police van was outside.
Yeah.
I got into that, and he said, we think we know where they might be going. We'll give you a tour around the area.
Yeah.
Well, we never saw them. So they gave me a lift back home. And said, in a few hours' time, the forensics officer will be coming. And he came at 9 o'clock. He couldn't do anything because the cover of the Walkman, although it's plastic, it couldn't take fingerprints.
Right, it wasn't shiny enough.
No, I thought, damn, I might have got them there.
Yeah.
But, and then I just waited for a call from the detectives about a few weeks later. Said, can you come down and have a look at the mug book?
Yeah.
So went to the station, went upstairs in there. They got about 4 books, and they said, have a look through there. And only one boy in the whole book looked similar. And I said, that's the look, but it's not him. And I can't say it's him. You know.
Yeah.
The police were very good.
Did it sound like if they could have identified them, they could have done something?
I think they had an idea of who they wanted from the very first. Because
that is a problem. There was a case. This happened to my wife. It wasn't in London. It was in Newcastle upon Tyne. We were living up there at the time, and she was walking home from work. We live right in the city, not far from St James's Park, and she's walking home from work, and there were 2 girls following her. Well, she turned into our street, the block of flats where we lived, and at the front door of the block of flats, one of them pulled out a knife and said, give me your purse. Now, Julie, she really didn't fancy doing. I would have given up. I would have just given them whatever they wanted if they've got a knife. But she said no, and she hit the intercom, and I was home, and she said, open the door straight away. I opened the door, let her in. She told me what had happened. We got the police. The police had CCTV footage of the girls following Julie through the town. But because they didn't have CCTV footage of the actual incident, and they knew who they were, but because they didn't have footage of the actual incident, they didn't even go and round them up. They didn't even go and talk to them.
Yeah, people say, oh, you should have thumped them. There are 3 of them.
No.
If I could take them one out, I'm still left with the big guy.
Yeah. But,
and he was standing well away.
and it was a hammer the fella had?
Yeah, a hammer.
Goodness
And I think
me.
they're crafty, because although it's most probably an offensive weapon, it's not a knife. And we know how they've strong down knife crime.
Yeah, but if they were stopped by the police and asked why you're carrying a hammer, you're doing some DIY. I mean, they'd have to have a story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's why the police were hoping they would catch him in the area they were being.
Yeah, that's the point. If they caught him hammer-handed, they've got him. Yeah, because who carries a hammer around Surbiton at night? Yeah.
I got one bit of advice for people. If you're going to carry a small amount of notes, if someone robs you, it's your words against theirs. Take the last three numbers of a banknote. So if the police do stop and they say, we've been told that you've robbed this person of £10, we know the number, empty out your pockets. And they find the number in a banknote. How did it get there? Am I psychic? You know, how did I know that
I don't know if people are going to get at all that trouble, though, of writing down numbers of banknotes.
You only have to do one.
I see, I got you. You only have to do, you don't have to do them all, do you, now?
Yeah, if they caught you, very quickly, they've still got it on them.
Yeah.
You've got a chance of getting them.
Yeah, or you could always just keep a fiver in your wallet all the time as a float that you know the number of, and if you do get mugged, let them have that one.
Also, the advice
in what they take, yeah.
If you can look at their faces, do, but they don't like that.
Yeah.
Look at their shoes. You can identify some people by their shoes, especially trainers. Anything that stands out, that would be useful to the police.
Good advice, Ian. Hey, thanks for your call.
No problems, mate.
Well, an inquest has found that the deaths of 6 people in a Camberwell tower block fire could have been prevented by proper fire safety checks. 3 adults and 3 children died in the fire at Luckenoll House in July 2009. It's Britain's worst ever tower block blaze. And today, an inquest jury have criticised the owners, Southwark Council and the fire and rescue operation. Joining me now is Councillor Ian Wingfield, Deputy Leader for Southwark Council.
Good evening, Graham.
Pretty damning this for the council.
Extremely damning.
Can you explain why the fire safety checks weren't thorough enough?
Well, in common with other local authorities, when the power was transferred in terms of the regulations in 2006, I think a lot of local authorities were quite slow in the take-up of doing their fire risk assessments. One of the things that has come out of this tragedy is the fact that we've completed now all our fire risk assessments for our high-rise blocks. Over 4,500 have been done. And we've also invested nearly £50 million in fire safety works.
So whose responsibility was it back then to make sure that tower blocks were safe?
Well, the findings from the inquest go back to the 1980s. Before 2006, the responsibility lay with the fire brigade, as I've just indicated, from 2006.
But as the owners, it was you that asked, you decided which contractors carried out the work.
Well, quite so.
And then presumably you'd have to inspect the work, and presumably the work was inspected.
Yes, and the fire brigade were the people who gave the authority in terms of the fire risk assessments at the time. So everything was compliant as far as we were aware
because
with the regulations.
The wrong materials were used for some improvements in the block.
Indeed, and there was a variety of professionals interviewed during the inquest. They gave different accounts of the materials used, and as far as we're concerned, there were issues involved with communications between the contractors, subcontractors, and the council as who was the appropriate person to carry out all these checks in line with the regulations.
How has the procedure changed since then, since 2009?
Well, what we've done is invest heavily in a stronger contract management regime. We are fully compliant now with fire safety regulations. We had, and the proof for the pudding is in the eating, if I might say that, because we've had 2 fires subsequently in tower blocks, and in both instances, the fire safety measures stood up to to the demands of those particular incidents. So, I'm quite confident that our homes meet the current fire safety standards, and I'm confident that our residents are living in safety as much as anybody else in the country.
Will someone lose their job at the council over this?
Well, as we've already indicated, it was the inquest has found it was a complex series of interactions between the various organisations we've already discussed, and all of that together led to this tragedy, unfortunately.
But wasn't one person ultimately responsible?
Well, the inquest didn't find that, but if it had have found it, we would have taken the sternest disciplinary measures against that member of staff.
What we've heard from relatives and also from lawyers representing relatives is that they're most disappointed that no one has said sorry. Do you think it's the council's position to say that now?
We are sorry. And we admit the fact that there were serious failings in the council procedures at the time. We hold our hands up to that. We're not trying to brush anything under the table because, this has a significance not just in Southwark, but across London and the country. And we're hoping that the recommendations that the coroner's made to the Secretary of State will be taken up by the government so that everybody in this country can feel safer.
Councillor Ian Wingfield, Deputy Leader of Southwark Council, thanks for your time this evening.
Thank you, Graham.
It's 6:15. Let's get the latest news now with Richard Main.
Thanks, Graham. The jury at the inquest into the death of 6 people in a fire at a block of flats in southeast London has found that numerous opportunities were missed to carry out fires.
Mick in Fulham.
I was just driving home and I heard you talking about London being the greatest city in the world.
Yes.
And though I love London and I live here for more than 30 years, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's the greatest city. Or what criteria are you using to?
Well, of all the cities I've visited and of the cities I've lived in, London is the one that excites me the most.
Well, I mean, I've been to Paris, which is a good city, a great city. The lights are on. It's a classy city.
Paris is a great city, but given the choice between Paris and London, I'd live in London every day.
The lights are off in Buckingham Palace at night time. Why? If you've got it, flaunt it. It's ridiculous that Buck House is dark at night. The place should be lit up.
Maybe she doesn't want to be bothered at night.
Well,
actually, it'd be a good idea if she goes out, though. It'd fool burglars. They thinks that she's home. She should leave a light on, actually.
Well, there is the odd room.
But in Paris, they don't even have a royal family. And Versailles out of town.
Yeah, I mean, they have classier buildings by a factor of 50.
They have that Frenchy-looking building, the French architect, which is beautiful, but it's French. It's not. I mean, it's not British. So you wouldn't want it. You wouldn't want London to look like Paris. You want it to look like London.
Open your mind. Open up. The fact that French architecture is dodgy. You just can't make a bold statement. To say that London is the greatest city in the world, you may be kidding people there. And to say that, London is a great city, but I've been around world cities, a lot of them. And, I wouldn't say that London is the greatest city in the world.
Where else is better?
Well, I'm
and
saying
why?
Paris is a great city because it's got great architecture. It's got
London's got great architecture.
Not compared with every time you throw a stone in Paris, you've got something to look at. The museums. They've got
talking museums. You're talking London's got a problem with museums.
We don't have a problem with museums, but I mean,
what's some of the finest museums in the world?
Well, it doesn't come anywhere close to the Louvre for a start. Anything you've got in London, the Tate.
And what's in the Louvre? Italian stuff. The Mona Lisa.
Who cares what it is?
I know, but it's not even French.
That attracts.
Right.
Well,
have you been in just the National Gallery, top of Trafalgar Square? I mean, it's free to get in. It's every bit as good as the Louvre. All right, it hasn't got the Mona Lisa, but it's got other stuff in there. Got some.
Well, I mean, the Louvre is like it would. You could encompass all the galleries in almost the UK in the Louvre.
The reason why I say London is the greatest city on earth, one of the reasons why I couldn't make Paris the greatest city on earth is, for me, is because I don't speak French.
Oh, the hell with... I mean, neither do I, and I don't want to speak French. I mean...
Well, if I lived there, I'd want to speak French. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but I get paid to talk.
Yeah, and I mean, I would have difficulty in earning a living in Paris.
You know what I'm saying? So for me, London is the greatest city on earth because most people who listen to the radio in London can understand me because I speak a kind of English.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't allow the barrier. I mean, it has crossed my mind. Would I move there? The fact that I can't speak French does not mean zilch. I don't. The only thing that I would miss by not speaking French is to be able to sit down with people in cafes and talk. You know.
When could you talk politics with a taxi driver in Paris? Isn't that one of the greatest? Isn't that one of the greatest things about London?
Well, the taxi drivers in Paris are not Parisian per se. They're mostly North African.
Yes,
I can see.
Not that that's a bad thing. You meet interesting people who drive taxis all over the world, and a lot of them aren't from that particular city.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But there's something special about London cabbies, isn't there?
There is,
and the whole system with the knowledge and everything. Does anywhere have that kind of system as good as that as London has?
No. I totally applaud the...
Where else can you go ice skating in a 1,000-year-old moat, which you can do right now at the Tower of London? I mean, there are so many different aspects to this fabulous city that make it, in my opinion, and I'll say it's in my opinion, greatest city on earth.
Well, I'm listening to you. I've got a slight gripe about the fact that the museums, the Buckhouse...
London museums are brilliant. There's something for everyone. The Natural History Museum, Science Museum, right next door to each other.
Yes.
You couldn't get, and as far as museums go, you couldn't get much further apart with what they're... and they are. Each one is a full day out and free.
Yes, I hear you. And I mean, I've lived in London for 30
years. The Louvre's not free.
No, I forget how much I paid.
National Gallery's free.
Yeah.
National Portrait Gallery's free too.
Yeah,
it's Mick. You trust me on this one. London's the greatest city on earth, and you even speak the language.
I hear you. Except that I've just started going there
to Paris,
and I'm pretty gobsmacked by Paris at the moment. And the great thing about it is, for 2 hours out of London, you're in a completely different culture.
There's another reason why London is the greatest city on earth. It's only 2 hours from Paris.
BBC London 94.9.
London's news.
London stories.
Can aircraft noise affect a child's education? A University of London study has found that kids who live under the Heathrow flight path are suffering 2-month delays in their reading development. A local council claims youngsters have put up with continual disruption, which would only get worse if there was a third runway. Let's speak to Councillor Colin Eller, who's the environment spokesman for Hounslow Council. Evening, Councillor.
Good evening, Graham.
Now, Heathrow Airport do pay for double glazing and soundproofing in people's homes and schools already, don't they?
They do to a certain extent, yes. For I think about 10 years now, they've started a program of soundproofing our schools. They certainly haven't soundproofed all of them, but we do thank them for their generosity in the works that they have done.
There was a pilot scheme running. Is that still running?
There was a pilot scheme running, which was initially the money we got was from the fines on aircraft, but it has actually broadened out and is a little bit more comprehensive now. But as I say, there's about 40 of our schools under the flight path, affected to differing degrees. Not every school is soundproofed, and not every school, for example, has air conditioning, which means that they can keep their windows closed during the summer.
And this delay in their reading ability that's been measured, saying they're behind by 2 months, how has it been measured?
That's a good question. I think you've got to ask the University of London. I'm not an academic, but I would imagine they would have measured children's development, and they would probably find that the children in the noisier schools, their development lags behind. But again, I think I'd refer you to them as to their methodology.
What would you like to see happen then?
Well, we would like to see Heathrow be better, not bigger. We would like less noise, and I don't know how that's going to be possible. There certainly have been some advances made in terms of a little bit quieter aircraft, because an aircraft, even the quiet ones, are still quite noisy, but certainly better soundproofing in the schools. You mentioned earlier that residents get soundproofing. They don't get very much soundproofing. It's not a very generous scheme, so our young people are woken up very early in the morning, sometimes 4:35 in the morning, by planes going over their bedrooms. You know, they have to suffer the noise persistently every 90 seconds in the classroom. We would like to see less of that. We would like to see better soundproofing and you know, less night flights, because then maybe our kids will get a bit more sleep at night.
Do you think maybe the council should legislate for that?
Well, we can't. It's not something that we can legislate for. I mean, even building regulations don't allow us to insist that that houses are soundproof effectively. There is no legislation that we can use. There is European and there's national legislation that limits the number of flights going in and out of Heathrow, that limits the number of night flights, but this is not something that we have in our gift, unfortunately.
Since this report came out, have you had a response from Heathrow Airport?
No, I haven't talked to Heathrow. I've had a good response from BBC, I must say that, because I did a little broadcast earlier on for tomorrow's TV, so I think your response has been better than Heathrow's.
Councillor Colin Eller, who's the Environment Spokesman for Hounslow Council. Good to talk to you. Thanks for your time this evening, Councillor. More reaction now on the inquest verdicts from the Lacanau House fire. It was a flat fire, the worst tower block fire in British history. 6 people died in the blaze in 2009 in the Camberwell Tower block. I'm joined now by Harriet Harman, the MP for Camberwell and Peckham. Good evening, Harriet.
Good evening.
Your reaction to the verdict?
Well, first and foremost, our thoughts once again are with the families of those who died. 3 women and 3 children died, and what was so tragic about the inquest verdict is it was clear that these deaths could have so easily been avoided. They should never have happened.
Does the government need to do more to make sure that buildings are up to spec for fire safety?
Well, I think, we've all got to really think about our responsibilities on this. The council, the fire service, but also, me as the local MP, we were in government at the time and we were responsible for the inspection system for fire safety, which clearly was so woefully inadequate and has cost these people their lives.
There's a call for sprinklers to be retrofitted in old blocks of flats. Should that happen?
Well, absolutely. If that's what the coroner has said, that at the moment there's a rule that new buildings have to have sprinklers, but clearly existing buildings, she's saying, need sprinklers as well.
What's the most important thing for us to do now, the most important lesson learned?
Well, I think not to have everybody pointing the finger at everybody else and all passing the buck and apportioning blame and saying that was then, it couldn't happen now. I think, we've got to feel that with 6 people losing their lives totally unnecessarily, we have all got to work together, and I include myself in that, as well as the council, the fire service, the current government, so that we don't point the finger and apportion blame, but we actually do an overhaul of fire safety in tower blocks.
Harriet Harman, the MP for Camberwell and Peckham. Thanks for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Joining me now is Councillor Ian Wingfield, Deputy Leader for Southwark Council.
Good evening, Graham.
Pretty damning this for the council.
Extremely damning.
Can you explain why the fire safety checks weren't thorough enough?
Well, in common with other local authorities, when the power was transferred in terms of the regulations in 2006, I think a lot of local authorities were quite slow in the take-up of doing their fire risk assessments. One of the things that has come out of this tragedy is the fact that we've completed now all our fire risk assessments for our high-rise blocks. Over 4,500 have been done, and we've also invested nearly £50 million in fire safety works.
So whose responsibility was it back then to make sure that tower blocks were safe?
Well, the findings from the inquest go back to the 1980s. Before 2006, the responsibility lay with the fire brigade, as I've just indicated, from 2006.
But as the owners, it was you that asked, you decided which contractors carried out the work.
Well, quite so.
And then presumably you'd have to inspect the work, and presumably the work was inspected.
Yes, and the fire brigade were the people who gave the authority in terms of the fire risk assessments at the time. So everything was compliant as far as we were aware
because
with the regulations.
The wrong materials were used for some improvements in the block.
Indeed, and there was a variety of professionals interviewed during the inquest. They gave different accounts of the materials used, and as far as we're concerned, there were issues involved with communications between the contractors, subcontractors, and the council as who was the appropriate person to carry out all these checks in line with the regulations.
How has the procedure changed since then, since 2009?
Well, what we've done is invest heavily in a stronger contract management regime. We are fully compliant now with fire safety regulations. We had, and the proof for the pudding is in the eating, if I might say that, because we've had 2 fires subsequently in tower blocks, and in both instances, the fire safety measures stood up to the demands of those particular incidents. So, I'm quite confident that our homes meet the current fire safety standards, and I'm confident that our residents are living in safety as much as anybody else in the country.
Will someone lose their job at the council over this?
Well, it was the inquest has found it was a complex series of interactions between the various organisations we've already discussed, and all of that together led to this tragedy, unfortunately.
But wasn't one person ultimately responsible?
Well, the inquest didn't find that, but if it had have found it, we would have taken the sternest disciplinary measures against that member of staff.
What we've heard from relatives and also from lawyers representing relatives is that they're most disappointed that no one has said sorry. Do you think it's the council's position to say that now?
We are sorry. And we admit the fact that there were serious failings in the council procedures at the time. We hold our hands up to that. We're not trying to brush anything under the table because, this has a significance not just in Southwark but across London and the country. And we're hoping that the recommendations that the coroner's made to the Secretary of State will be taken up by the government so that everybody in this country can feel safer.
Councillor Ian Wingfield, Deputy Leader of Southwark Council, thanks for your time this evening.
Thank you, Graham.
Ian in Ashley Green. Hello there, Ian. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
You want to talk about noise? Yeah.
I disagree with the finding. It just strikes me as it's probably got more to do with income than noise. If you live
you're talking about this study that's out that says that kids who live on the flight path of Heathrow Airport are 2 months behind other kids in their reading.
Yeah, I think obviously it depends on who sponsors the survey, but it strikes me that if you live under the flight path, you might not be the most affluent people. Therefore, you might not be able to get the best education. So it's easy to blame noise, but I'm not persuaded.
You're just saying that the schools under the flight path aren't as good?
I'm saying the schools under the flight path are going to be in areas that aren't as affluent. So potentially, yes.
So you're saying the study's flawed? It's putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with 5?
Well, it's like if you're going to go, if you're going to get a survey done, you're going to sort of tilt it your way to try and find the result you're looking for. It's not going to be completely fair and an open sort of view. It's going to have to come from an ulterior motive for them.
And what do you think their ulterior motive is?
Well, noise does annoy a lot of people, and there are going to be certain lobbies that are going to say, we need to sort of be a bit more considerate, and that's not building any more flight paths at Heathrow or Stansted or wherever. So you might well say, okay, this is damaging our kids. We can't have these airports. No matter how important they are to our economy and our country, we can't have them because our kids are suffering. Whether you believe that or not, it's, as I say, I think there's probably other things.
I mean, it is quite a big sample group. There are around 40 schools directly under the flight path.
Of all different kind of, well, I've not seen the survey, but the first thing that occurred to me was that if you're under the flight path, you're not at Eton.
Well, the research was done by the University of London. Now, it is the local council that's putting it out, but it was the University of London that did the survey. I don't think they have an ulterior motive.
So the local government or local authority didn't ask the University of London to do the survey for them, then?
Not as far as I know. All right, but you're not having it here.
Well, no, there might be more to it. That's what I'm saying.
All right. Hey, thank you very much.
Yes.
If you'd like to add to this, what are your views on this? Noise. Does it affect education? Were you a kid that grew up in a noisy neighbourhood, didn't do you any harm? Or do you think it held you back? 0207 224 2000. It's BBC London 94.9. It's 22 past 6. I'm Graham Mack. Jay in Chelsea.
Yeah, I just despair of this government. If you're asking me from what is my main concerns, libraries being closed, that to me has more pertinence than worrying about pensioners and whether they're entitled to or should be entitled to winter fuel allowance.
Do you think it should be means tested then?
I think if you pay into the system and they have this ability for you to get into that catchment group, then it should be given to you.
Okay, because we do seem to think we got this attitude, and I don't know whether we've been sold a dummy here that, you pay into the system and then when you get to a certain age, then you can claim it back. That's not how it works, because it's like a Ponzi scheme. It's the people who are working who are paying to keep the people who are not.
And I don't have a problem with that.
But it will be a problem when there are so many people who are retired and there's not enough people working to put the money in the system to pay them.
Well, then maybe we need to look at rejuvenation in terms of employment and what we're doing. Because living in central London, what I see more of is the acquisition of properties, and that's what it seems to be about. And then the amenities, which I pay, like you pay for your council tax, those other things seem to be dwindling. They seem to be more building of properties as opposed to concentration of young people through libraries or educative purposes. There seems to be less development of that.
Yeah, you have to ask the question, though, in this modern age, what is the role of a library?
Are you serious?
Well, what is the role of a library?
Well, what I remember, and I remember with great fondness and joy, is my parents taking me to the library, making me understand the general use, how to reference, to go to the reference library, how to research for different books and get books for my enjoyment and pleasure. And I think children still need to have that facility open to them, because not everybody has the ability to have Kindles or other devices to download books.
As far as the reference section, though, there's a thing called Google.
But you can still access that in the library. I think we're working from a premise that everybody at home has a computer.
I think you got it there, didn't you, though? You said so if that's the role of libraries, is to be the place where you can go and get the knowledge, do we need to be spending as much on the people that are in there sorting the books and everything? Has technology made libraries cheaper, but we're still running to the old model with the Dewey Decimal System? Have things, that's why my question was, what is the role of the library? Libraries, they thought they were getting up to date when you could rent cassettes. They weren't really. They need to reinvent themselves and do a selling job. because otherwise they're going to lose their funding. It's just like anything. Everybody's a salesman these days. You've got to sell what it is you do. Otherwise, no one's going to pay for it.
Okay.
London's news, London stories.
This is Drive Time, weekdays from 5
on BBC London 94.9.
Good evening, I'm Graham Mack, and it's nice to be here in the big city of London talking about the issues of the day. What's on your mind? 0207 224 2000. That's 0207 224 2000. Or you can text 81333, or if you prefer, 81333. Start your message with London.
This is Drive Time, weekdays from 5
on BBC London 94.9.
Joyce is in Tottenham. Evening, Joyce.
Oh, hello, Graham. Hello, yes. I want to talk about this noise.
Yeah.
Yes. Would you say that kids who are adversely affected by noise that perform dismally?
Yeah, this is a new report. It says the kids who live on the flight path of Heathrow Airport are 2 months behind in their reading age.
Well, I'm not surprised having that noise constantly going above your head. But at the same token, why would anybody want to live in front of within a flight path region? I never know. If it was me personally, I would move if I had children, to be honest with you.
Well, not everyone can afford to live. You know, this is an expensive city. Not everyone can afford to live in posh places like Tottenham.
Yeah, no, I want to talk about my own personal experience of noise, right?
Yes.
Living in social housing, right? Yeah. Is like it's like living in hell, really. It depends on the people that you live around. My personal experience is this: any flats that I've lived in do not have sound installation. They do not do sound installation. Now, I've been to court, I've seen solicitors to get my council to install that. And they said that they don't do it because there is a legislation that if council houses were built before a certain year, they are not obligated to put down any form of sound installation. So all these houses that are converted into flats, I moved out last October from a house conversion because I'm fed up of being disturbed with the people living above me who were ignorant and didn't have any respect for my own peace of enjoyment in my flat. So I moved out because of that.
Well, Joyce, thanks for your call this evening. We're talking about noise. If you want to join in the debate, 0207 224 2000. That's 0207 224 2000. I'm Graham Mack. It's BBC London 94.9 at 6:10. Now, you might think that Facebook and Twitter are where it's at nowadays, but according to a new study, the humble London bus is the hottest social network for London's teenagers. Free travel has made buses the place to bond with friends. Earlier this evening, I spoke to Dr. Anna Goodman. She's the co-author of this report. This report is done by your organisation, the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Why are you interested in what goes on the bus?
Funded by an institute called the National Institute for Health Research, which is an institute interested in broad health effects of social policy, so not just of things which a doctor might do, but how bigger social interventions affect health. And so one of these is bus travel. You can think about various ways in which having access to free bus travel might have both good and bad consequences for people's health. Think about maybe getting extra trips, so maybe you're being more active because you're getting out of the house, or less active because you're getting a bus instead of walking, the ability to explore London and kind of feel a sense of citizenship and engagement, which we've talked about in this study, social and mental well-being perhaps, and be able to, be connected and be part of your social network and also connect to the capital. So it's all these elements that the broader study is interested in looking at, with a view to guiding social policy on the benefits and potential problems of bus travel, and particularly this policy of free bus travel.
Yeah. Could the kids be leading the way here? Because adults on the bus don't tend to talk to anybody. I mean, it's difficult to make eye contact on a London bus.
Yes, I think that is a very striking difference between adults and young people is, because young people, and it's usually people they know that they talk with, but because they do travel in a group, then that's, it's different. It's a site of socialisation. I'm not sure. I think that...
Do you ride the bus, Doctor?
I do. I do sometimes.
Is it a social experience for you?
No, I'm typical like many adult commuters. I usually travel with people I don't know, and therefore I don't talk to them. And I think the main difference with the young people is they have this code where they travel with people they know. They go out of the way to travel with friends, so they therefore get to talk to their friends. Dr.
Anna Goodman from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine.
BBC London 94.9.
London's news.
London stories.